Ukrainian actor Volodymyr Zelensky has achieved fame portraying a president in this TV show, which is broadcast on a channel owned by a man backing his real-life presidential campaign. Billionaire Igor Kolomoisky has provided security, lawyers and vehicles for Zelensky. His bodyguard accompanied Zelensky on the campaign trail. The car Zelensky uses belongs to a company owned by one of Kolomoisky's companies. And Kolomoisky's lawyer is now working for Zelensky's campaign. When the results of the first round of the election became clear on March 31st, President Petro Poroshenko did not mince his words.
Доля вже так розпорядилася, що звела мене в другому турі, і я не соромлюся це казати, звела мене з маріонеткою Коломойського.
Kolomoisky, filmed here in Switzerland in 2018, is an arch foe of Poroshenko and one of the richest men in Ukraine, with holdings in the metal, petroleum and media sectors. He set up Privatbank in the 1990s, which quickly grew to be one of the biggest financial institutions in Ukraine. But in 2016, Poroshenko's government seized control of Privatbank, claiming that billions of dollars were embezzled from it. Kolomoisky denies any wrongdoing and is fighting in court to get Privatbank back. RFERL recorded an off-camera interview with Zelensky about the issue.
Скажіть, чи підтримуєте ви компенсацію чи повернення Приватбанку для Ігоря Коломойського?
Та мені все одно, що буде з Ігорем Коломойським. До цього повинні розбиратися.
Щодо Приватбанку.
Приватбанк зараз державна установа, чому вона повинна повертатись Коломойському?
Kolomoisky has himself briefly held public office, becoming governor of his native Dnepropetrovsk region in 2014. It was shortly after mass protests toppled Ukraine's Kremlin-friendly president Viktor Yanukovych.
Но раз мы идем в Европу, мы хотим, чтобы все реформы, которые должны произойти в стране, они должны соответствовать. Мы должны в результате этих реформ получить страну с законодательной, административной базой, такая, как действует в европейских странах.
Within months, Kolomoisky was helping to finance volunteer units to fight against Russia-backed separatists who had seized control in nearby regions of eastern Ukraine. He was credited with helping to prevent them from advancing into his region, but critics suggested he was also building a private army. On March 19, 2015, armed men occupied the offices of a state-owned oil company in Kiev. Kolomoisky was involved in a struggle for influence at the company called Ukr-Transnafta. When he emerged from the building, an RFERL journalist asked what he was doing there.
А что ты не спрашиваешь, как рейдерский захват в Укртранснафте произошел? И русские диверсанты сюда попали, а? Что ты об этом не спрашиваешь? Или тебе Коломойского, надо увидеть?
Days later, President Poroshenko dismissed him as governor after Kolomoisky offered to step down. Kolomoisky continued his business activities, later moving to Switzerland. Zelensky travelled to Geneva in February 2018 to attend Kolomoisky's birthday party. In April 2019, RFERL asked Kolomoisky about his ties with Zelensky.
По зустрічам з Зеленським, він у мене був на дні рождения в прошлом году в Женеві.
Це останній раз, коли ви особисто бачились?
Да, я думаю, да. Надо так, это самое, но, по-моему, да.
Okay.
Ну, если где-то, может, я уже не буду, я уже начинаю, вы когда так задаете вопросы, как следователь, так я начинаю ерзать. Но, может, где-то и пересекся, еще черт его знает.
But by checking flight records, RFERL discovered that after that birthday party, Zelensky flew to Geneva another 10 times. Furthermore, after Kolomoisky moved to Israel, Zelensky flew to Tel Aviv 3 times between October and December 2018. It's not clear if the two men met on these occasions. They both insist their relationship is professional and based on Zelensky's TV work. The aspiring politician says it's not political.
Let's discuss the Ukrainian-Russian conflict timeline and what is behind this bloody disaster. How good Ukrainian people were cheated out of their peace, prosperity, good neighborhood, and in many cases, their homes, property, and lives. What a disaster this is. What a shame. All, of course, has roots in the collapse of Soviet Union and how the state had collapsed. In 1991, all ex-Soviet republics were cheated by its leadership and came crashing into abyss and chaos. I am not going to describe events of this disastrous time. All of it is readily available on the open sources. As a matter of fact, all information is out there, and the truth is a matter that can be reconstructed under thoughtful study and careful consideration of facts, interests, and logic. One important to our study factor needs to be discussed here is the birth of oligarchs in post-Soviet territories. One of these is Igor Kolomoisky, who is now under arrest in Zelensky, Ukraine. There were many such individuals who became extremely rich and influential in a matter of few years, which is a factor to consider because from psychological point, we must understand the built-up momentum and unchecked ambitions of this people. Kolomoisky was a regular Jewish kid in Soviet intelligentsia family born in Dnepropetrovsk, a heavily industrialized center in eastern Ukrainian SSR. He is an educated man with great work ethic and attention to detail with chess-forged logic skills. After the collapse, he made his fist money by trading various goods with Moscow with other connected individuals. They got into trading raw materials and made extreme amounts of money organizing their own banks, media companies and other. The influence and wealth made him feel unstoppable, and he and other like him developed political ambitions because wealth and power are synonyms in this part of the world. With that comes boundless and limitless corruption. Countless scandals were brewing around him and are there to this day. I am saying all this because it is important to note that Kolomoisky is alleged to sponsor Maidan coup. He is sponsor of neo-Nazi groups and paramilitary organizations such as Azov, Adar and others to use them as leverage to influence power. He is also an alleged man behind Zelensky who brought him to power through manipulating Ukrainian public. Problem is his creations are now out of his control, and Pandora's box was open to haunt its creator. American neocon globalist mafia is also a force that he cannot deal with, and it took over his marionette creations and now grown into monster of epic proportions. Who and how pulled the trigger in Donbass in 2014? In an interview with Russia's Zavtra newspaper, Igor Strelkov, a former commander of pro-Moscow separatists in eastern Ukraine, claimed personal responsibility for starting a conflict in which 4,300 people have been killed since April. Strelkov admitted that his actions escalated the conflict and that he had expected more overt Russian support initially. He also mentioned the involvement of Russian vacationers in the conflict, especially in the assault on Mariupol. Strelkov expressed disappointment that Moscow did not absorb the separatist territories into Russia after the referendums in Donetsk and Luhansk. He has been living in Russia since moving to Moscow and has called for increased Russian military involvement in eastern Ukraine through fringe publications and YouTube. The UN reported over 4,300 deaths in eastern Ukraine by mid-November, with casualties continuing even after a ceasefire was established. In 2014, Igor Strelkov, Igor Girkin, the former commander of pro-Russian separatist forces in eastern Ukraine, obtained weapons and equipment through various means, primarily during the early stages of the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Some of the sources of weapons and equipment for separatist forces during that time included capture and seizure from Ukrainian forces, smuggling, black market. There are allegations that a military train full of various weapons was delivered to the separatists from Crimea, enough to fit for combat a division worth of soldiers, which is a rough estimate of 10,000 fighters. This is a very significant task to undertake, organize and successfully deliver. Very unlikely to be done even by a Russian government in short time frame in the middle of Crimea seizing. In the debates between Girkin-Strelkov and Navalny, now imprisoned Russian opposition leader, an alleged agent sponsored from outside of Russia or so-called I know agent. This is an important story for another time. Girkin-Strelkov said that he got the weapons from Crimea, and he also said, or implied, that it was not the Russian side, nor the Russian oligarchs, and he will not say who it is to preserve his officer's honor. There is also a known fact that Kolomoisky was acquainted with Girkin-Strelkov. He mentioned it to prank call now flashed from the internet. Here it is important to ask a question. Who had the means and influence to take significant number of weapons and move them across the country in the situation of Russian occupation and deliver them to the small group of pro-Russian separatists in Donbass? My hypothesis is that it was available to only a tiny number of influential individuals on Ukrainian side who have this kind of experience to supply and outfit paramilitary organizations and to use them in their strategies. Yes, I believe one of these people could have been Igor Kolomoisky. The question is, why would he do that while it was known that he is very pro-Ukrainian? The answer to this question could only be answered after the following question is clear. Did Igor Kolomoisky want to become president of Ukraine? Yes, he did, as a very ambitious man with means and power and the taste of political power in the country where power and extreme wealth are synonyms. He wanted to become president of Ukraine. He also had a personal motive. In 2015, Igor Kolomoisky, the Dnepropetrovsk governor, was relieved by his political and business rival Petro Poroshenko. This was humiliating and shameful outing which solidified Kolomoisky's ambitions, and he was now planning for revenge. He could not go against political rivals in power directly for simple reason that they were placed there by Victoria Nuland neocon gang. Kolomoisky did not make a sufficient deal with neocons for reasons unknown to me at this time. However, this left him with limited options. He now had to make do with resources available to him, which were his liquid funds, his media channels, his experience and ties in nationalistic and straight-up neo-Nazi paramilitary circles, and his brilliant mind as a chess strategist. He wanted to push Poroshenko out and humiliate him. He understood that Poroshenko is more attractive to Ukrainian electorate simply because he was Ukrainian and Orthodox Christian, and other points of biography are like average person and are perceived as soulless oligarchs, therefore a different approach is needed. Zelensky was a very good candidate for many reasons and was selected by Kolomoisky to be moved in the position of presidency and later either replaced by him or be controlled from the shadows. Zelensky was young, very charismatic, popular, snappy, smart. Handsome comedian who would neutralize any allegations of neo-Nazi ties. Brilliant decision to cast Zelensky in a sitcom social comedy as a teacher turned president of Ukraine and spun as a very popular show in 1+1 network, which was of course an asset of Igor Kolomoisky, ripped fruit during the election. Slow going but nevertheless bloody conflict in Donbass. Worsening economy. Mass immigration. Increasing beyond any belief corruption. Inflation and deteriorating relationship with neighboring Russia brought Poroshenko ratings to their all-time low levels, and the young charismatic Zelensky running on the platform of peace seemed very attractive to the Ukrainian public and resulted in the hands-down victory in the 2019 election. This was the plan and most of it went well for Kolomoisky. Most, but not all. He underestimated the neocon influence on young Zelensky and the power of ambitions now sparkling in Zelensky's mind. Now he has the stage, and he wants to be most popular comedian actor in the world, and any caution or fear is wiped from his mind with steady supply of white powder to the banker via street office of president. Kolomoisky's plan was derailed, and he had to run from Kiev to Switzerland until his recent return to Kiev, which led to his arrest. Knowing the above, let's summarize events in Ukraine in 2014. The events in Ukraine in 2014 were marked by significant political, social, and geopolitical developments. Here are 10 key points summarizing the major events of that year. 1. Euromaidan protests, effectively a coup-changing political regime initiated and sponsored by Obama administration, inclusive of now President Joe Biden. US State Department Representative Victoria Nuland. Remark: a lot of the same people are now in charge of US foreign policy. 2. Yanukovych flees. 3. Interim government formed by Nuland's boy Yatsi or Prime Minister Ossany Yatsenyuk. 4. Crimea annexation. In March, Russia annexed Crimea, following a referendum. Remarks: operation was clearly planned and executed by Russian government, resulting in a no shots fired, zero casualties annexation, which triggered Western sanctions. 5. Eastern Ukraine conflict. Pro-Russian separatist movements emerged in eastern Ukrainian regions, primarily Donetsk and Luhansk. Armed clashes between Ukrainian government forces and separatists escalated into a protracted conflict. Russia was accused of providing support to the separatist groups, which Moscow denied. Strelkov Girkin also denied Russian government backing. Remarks: there is an obvious difference between the level of planning and preparation and support in Donbass events and Crimea annexation. The level of execution which allowed Russia to move into Crimea without a bloodshed and achieve strategically critical objective of Black Sea Fleet base Sevastopol, which is existential to Russia in many ways. Yes, the base was in a long-term lease with Ukraine, however new government which was clearly pro-Western could have used it as leverage and was unexpectable to the Kremlin. This point is up for debate, but it is important to note, Donbass incursion was undertaken by a group of poorly trained and poorly armed men in the couple of thousand who came to the region on droves over several months. Very stark contrast to be noted. 6. Presidential elections. Petro Poroshenko, who campaigned on a platform of ending the conflict in eastern Ukraine and pursuing closer ties with the EU. 7. MH17 tragedy. In July, Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 people on board. Western governments accused Russian-backed separatists of being responsible for the downing of the plane. Remarks: there is a theory of how this event took place. New video will be produced to explain this theory. 8. Ceasefire and Minsk agreements. Remarks: these agreements were signed by Kiev and Donbas republics and Moscow. Most importantly, guaranteed by France and Germany. This agreement, we now know, were meant to buy time to militarize Ukraine and were never meant to be honored. This means that war was inevitable, and dishonest leaders of the West pushed for this conflict, knowing that this means war. 9. Severe economic challenges in Ukraine caused by severing merged at the hip Russian-Ukrainian economies. 10. Ongoing tensions led to the escalation of February 24, 2022, and conflict known as Special Military Operation or Russo-Ukrainian War. 11. Bonus point: South Stream gas pipeline, which was to supply gas from Russian shore to Turkey, bypassing Ukraine via Black Sea, was cancelled in December 2014. Energy and other supply via pipelines is a background theme to this conflict. It almost seems that someone wants to desperately keep control of energy supply to Europe under control via transit through territories which can be controlled easily, rather than to have Europe to have direct supply with cheaper energy. With this control the economies of Europe to keep tight grip. We will explore this in further videos. Now let's answer the question posed as the main theme of this video. Could have Mr. Kolomoisky send weapons to Strelkov? If yes, then why? The answer is yes. Yes. because he wanted to remove influence of Kiev and other influential oligarchs in the region to then seize more control. He wanted to create trading chips from a situation where he had almost no leverage by using other side as a perfect deception and decoy for his actions and still reach his strategic goals. He understood that the West and the US are not picking him as their man to rule Ukraine, and he will be also removed from the financial stream's power and eventually from his own wealth. He wanted to stay relevant and in control and create a crisis where he would hold an upper hand in negotiating and hold a key to a solution. Kolomoisky later used a similar approach to creating a situation where he would hold a solution in by creating Zelensky. Dazzling plan, but has too much reliance on a third party and has too many unknowns, therefore failed both times. Caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions to be harmed and displaced, trillions in damages. But what a plan it was.
Менше смс-ок, будь ласка, більше законів.
National minority language. Can we create this opportunity? We already do that.
Вийдіть отсюда. Вийди отсюда, розбійник. Плохо чуєш мене? Англійською exit. Exit. Та йди вже, господі, ти. Чуєте чи ні? Ідіть, ідіть.
Ну, я слушаю Яценюка сейчас, мне кажется, он в последнее время.
Мы с Яценюком все договоримся, не переживай, это все политическая игра сегодня. Всех согласны с миром, а Яценюк сегодня ж непонятно в какой ситуации, потому что вместе с Порошенко они не объединились, поэтому сегодня они находятся в стадии или будут друг друга или будут нормально идти вместе с надеждой, что будет другая коалиция. Так что там будет все в порядке. Я сегодня виделся с Яценюком, с Ваковым и с Турчином.
Ничего они.
Нормально, ну все понимают, что эту войну должен быть мир.
Ну а что они про НАТО заявляют тогда?
Да ну слушай, кто в НАТО кого ждет?
Ну,
вы не обращайте внимания на политические возгласы эти все. Какое НАТО?
Пригласи, я же тебе говорю, пригласи их сюда. Пригласи их пообщаться со мной. Либо с кем-то еще.
Ну куда? Они же не могут в Москву поехать. Ты будешь в Донецке, так это самое. Или ты между по скайпу?
Ну, либо по скайпу хотя бы.
Ну хорошо, ну поговоришь ты с ними. Я тебе передаю то, что мы, в общем-то, обсуждаем и с Порошенко, и с этими самыми.
Ну, чтобы они поняли, это мы друг друга понимаем с тобой, да?
Да, они все и так понимают, поверь мне. Но кто-то может разговаривать, а кто-то пока ввиду политических идей. Я, например, не иду в списке, понимаешь?
Ну, тебе это не надо.
Ну, понятно.
Давай, есть у тебя что?
Есть у нас что? Виски есть? Сейчас. Ты перешел на крепкие напитки?
Тебе показать?
Не-не, я вижу, что водочка у тебя налита. Столичная.
Ну.
Что вообще в Москве, как обстановка?
Тепло. Ну, я как бы редко бываю там, но...
Я тебе скажу, что за 23 года мы что не сделали, так кавказцев не пустили. И то уже, слава богу.
А Беларусь? Че?
Ну, в Беларуси там батька, он же никого вообще не пускает.
Ну, вот они не знают проблем, поэтому все рабочие места.
Ну, конечно.
Все... Кстати, недавно мастер-класс. О, давай.
Давай.
Твое здоровье.
За встречу.
За встречу. Недавно мастер-класс по физкультуре проводил.
Да, я знаю, везде, во всем ютубе.
Ну, я хоть водочку-то и пью, но за физкультурой это хорошее дело. Народ надо пропагандировать к здоровому образу жизни.
А водочка это здоровый напиток.
Водочка самый здоровый напиток.
100%. Я вчера мы водочку тоже пили.
А, с кем?
Ну, мы тут сидели в офисе, поужинали. Тимур был, Палица был, Зеленский был.
Сказал, что в ДНР все-таки нормальные ребята.
Так я все знаю, что вы нормальные ребята. Все вам, кстати, очень симпатизируют.
Да ладно, серьезно?
100%. Потому что вы за свой дом показали, что вы его кому отдадите.
Ну. А я с Ярошем общался недавно. Вот, ну, он, конечно, такой весь упрямый. Ну, он, кстати, тут заявляет, что он мертв. Пресса.
Чего? Он, по-моему, живой.
Ну, вчера я с ним общался, живой, вот как тебя сейчас вижу.
Живой. Если был бы мертв, мне сказали.
А говорят, ранен, наши газеты пишут. Смертельно.
Написали, что что-то вообще, но я думаю, вряд ли. Так вроде нормально.
Да, ничего. Прорвемся, как говорится. Главное, чтобы не пропускать. А с Боингом что?
В смысле?
Ну, что Порошенко-то думает?
Так, а что мы думаем?
Ну,
Понял, по-моему, и так все понятно. Ну, случайность получилась какая-то, никто специально не хотел его сбивать.
ну, я уверен, что это ваших рук дело.
Да перестань, ну что ты рассказываешь? Шмальнули там случайно, думали по одному, попали по другому. Это как раз нормально, ничего страшного. Воин жалко, и людей жалко, а так, конечно, ну ты знаешь, что всегда попадают в неправильные руки какие-то серьезные вещи, и получилось